Welcome to Trauma and Transcendence, where healing meets awakening. I'm Amanda M. Dodd, your guide on this transformative journey. Thank you for joining me on this episode. Let's transcend together. Hello, welcome back to this episode of Trauma and Transcendence. Today is a very special episode. I have my dear friend and colleague, Nora Knople. Hello, Nora.
Hello, Amanda. It's so good to be here. Thank you for having me.
It is such a pleasure to have you. For our friends on the podcast who don't yet know the magic of Nora Knople, what would you like to share with them?
Oh, the magic of Nora Knople. What does that entail? Well, I am a hypnotist, first and foremost. I've been a hypnotist for going on 24 years now. It does not seem like that's true. I'm also a Reiki master, achieved Reiki master status last year. So that's exciting too. And I've learned to, let's just say, I guess, explore all the different wonderful ways that energy can speak to us, so to say. And then I'm also a mindfulness instructor and meditation teacher. I wear a lot of hats, as was pointed out yesterday when I was in a meeting with some other wellness colleagues putting together a wonderful event we have coming up in June. That I apparently do a lot of things. I don't realize that I do. So that's kind of a snippet. I'm also a wife and mom and grandma. Those things are important to me as well. So yeah, that's a little bit about the insight of me and what I guess is the magic of what I do. I'm still discovering what that magic is. That's the
Isn't
beautiful
that,
part of life.
yeah, that really is the beautiful part of life is that nothing's defined. Even when
No.
we think we've hit a glass ceiling, it's just an opportunity to say, what else is there?
Yeah. What else is there? And I'm glad you mentioned, excuse me, I'm glad you mentioned about the glass ceiling, because if you would have said to me 10 years ago that I was going to quit my job as the breadwinner in my family and take a step and open my private practice, like I said, I've been a hypnotist for 24 years, but it wasn't until the last 6 years that I decided to make this a full-time venture. That was a big risk. Being the breadwinner, taking a step, there's still some obstacles, though we're seeing fewer of them in people accepting what we do for a living.
Right.
So I'm really blessed. I set out with the motto that if I take care of the community will take care of me. And I've just manifested that into the wonder that is this space. So, yeah.
Aw. Yeah. So it's funny because my last guest on the podcast was a shaman, and and here you are also a shaman in your own right, because there's that concept of if I take care of the community will take care of me, and that's very much how a shaman lives.
It is. It is how a shaman lives. Although I don't live necessarily by that title, I am an ordained licensed minister in Ohio. But in our own, each of us, healers, shamans, ministers, wellness practitioners, whatever title you call yourself, we're all kind of bound by this silent, not so silent, maybe code of that's just what we do, right? When people, whether it's colleagues or people in the community, we just step up and step in. It's just who we are.
Heed the call. You
Mm-hmm.
mentioned something that I really relate with so much, and sometimes I say it, when I'm talking to clients and preparing for groups and things. Of I never thought I would be this. I never imagined I would. If you went back
Nope.
in time and attempted to prepare me to say, "Hey, you're going to go on to do all these things," I wouldn't have believed you about a year ago. Nonetheless, like 15 or 20
Same
years ago.
here.
Right. But then
Mm-hmm.
also, is there also that other feeling of, well, of course, how could I be anything else too?
Oh, absolutely. I was like, why am, how could, when I quit my job, there was a moment in my head of, and I don't know if I've actually ever said this out loud, but there was a moment of, how can I do this to my family, right? Just quit my
Mm.
job. I was the breadwinner. I was taking a big risk of putting us back into poverty, where we had spent so many years of just kind of trying to struggle to get by. But then that split second later, how could I not do this
Yeah.
and take a chance that I can actually do something that is worthwhile, that does make money, that is going to be, I am going to be self-sufficient. Why wouldn't I? Um, and
Isn't
and
it
I
a bigger
learned,
gift?
yeah, and I think I also learned that as raising, I'm a daughter. I have 4 daughters, and by taking that chance and not being stuck in the cookie cutter that I told myself I just had to be here and do this
Yeah.
and do this job, um, it showed them that there's endless possibilities. That you don't have to ever feel like you're stuck somewhere, that you have to be there. It is possible to get out of your own way, which I feel like that was a big shift in making this leap to take the chance that I've
Mhm.
taken in the last 6 years.
I feel like that's the art of a true hypnotist, a true coach, is we will internally reframe our life as we are
All the
going.
time.
And you don't have to be a hypnotist or a coach to do that either.
Hmm.
There's one
Yeah,
thing that Jason Linett says that I love. And when he's teaching and training, he will say, all of the reasons that you couldn't are now the reasons that you have to.
I
Something
love
along the lines of
Jason.
that. I love that.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
that is so profound and so true.
Right. And so, for all of the reasons that you thought, how could I do this for my family, then became the reasons of, this is why I have to do this for my family. I have to show them there are other options available, that they can
Absolutely. And
take a big
it,
risk, they can pay.
it,
Yeah.
it absolutely, it was a big risk, but it's all been very worthwhile, because not only, all of the reasons that I put out there that were invalid, like none of them have really come to fruition. When I've needed money,
Mhm.
it's come through the door.
Yeah.
When I, at moments where I felt scared, like, oh, am I going to be able to, it's going to be in those early months, am I going to be able to make rent this month? It was just always there,
Yeah.
to a point where I can proudly say, and I hope this doesn't sound like bragging, but
Mhm.
where I'm at a point now where my lease is coming up on this place, and
Yeah.
I go to the landlord every year now for the last 2 years and say, can I work on the same deal? And I just pay a year up front, so I don't have to worry about the rent every month. It's
Yeah.
already paid. And so it's just gotten to the point where it's just truly taking care of itself, because I have taken care of the community.
Yeah. No, definitely not a brag. It's a blessing, and we need to celebrate our blessings. We need to
Mm.
celebrate our wins and our achievements, just because it's such an important part of the journey. And that trust is
Yes.
not for the faint of heart, let me assure you.
It
Um,
was scary,
yeah.
let me tell you. It wasn't without fear, that's for sure. But fear can be one of those things, and I know this is true, that you can allow it to stifle you and
Mhm.
hold you back. And a lot of people that come to us as hypnotists, that's one of the big roadblocks that we help them, to overcome. But fear can also be that thing that motivates you to get on the other side of it. I look at fear sometimes as like, a leopard, if you will, right?
Yeah.
It's motivating me to get on the other side of that hurdle, so that there's something between me and the leopard, instead of something
Yeah.
between, me and achieving my goals. So, um, it's certainly, I've learned to look at it, at doing what I do, as the safety net, as a truly manifesting that it is a thriving and profitable business. And in doing that, it's what it's become.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh. So, our topic today is a really interesting one.
Yeah.
And we put that form together months ago of what we would be doing and talking about. And I tend to not be someone who plans. But what I love about this is, this evening, as you listeners are hearing this, I will be in the Salt Cave doing a group hypnosis meditation, and it's actually about calling your power back. And I thought that was so kind of synchronized with today because I can
Yeah.
imagine there were many times that you had to call your power back on this journey of stepping up and really empowering yourself in the way that you have, and then have gone on to empower your family members too to also grow. Tell me
Yeah.
about some of that.
So on in the early stages of 6 years ago, before I actually stepped on the other side of the hurdle between me and the leopard, um, the leopard was chasing me, and you often hear when, and I know this will sound familiar to a lot of people, that when you take a stance for yourself, people, and you stand up for being belittled or bullied or ridiculed, a lot of times people that are doing the ridiculing, right, will say to you, you're being defensive, right? Well, if you weren't being offensive, I wouldn't need to be defensive. I wouldn't need to be in that situation.
Yeah.
And I found that in that moment, I was being pushed, right? The universe will uses moments like that, like the leopard, like the people ridiculing and belittling you, and
Yeah.
it to push you to make a change. Why is this uncomfortable? Because you don't need to be here anymore. But in that moment, those very people that were doing that and doing a detriment to my mental health, I might say, because they were trying to get me to believe the things that they thought about me were true, that I knew weren't true. And in standing up for myself, they quite honestly said, you realize that by speaking to us this way, you're giving us your power. I couldn't believe they said that out loud to me. These are people that were my supervisors at my previous job. You're giving us your power. You realize that. And it was in that moment that I realized that no, they don't get it. I'm not giving them my power. I'm actually taking my power back by standing up and citing that these things you're
Yeah.
saying are not true, and here's proof, and here's why, and I'm not a part of this conversation anymore. And so that was just one moment where I realized that I wasn't giving them my power. I was taking my power back and taking a stance for myself in a way that I hadn't before.
Yeah.
Because I can tell you, previous to that moment, there were moments where people, and now I want to preface this also by saying that I'm not somebody who's opposed to critical feedback. Okay.
Mhm.
Because there's a place for the feedback. I'm very open to that, and I'm open to the varieties of delivery. But when you certainly know that that's not what's happening and you're just being ridiculed and bullied and harassed,
Yeah.
you know, I in previous moments I would have cowered to it. You're right. I'm going to identify as those things that you're telling me that I am, because I don't know myself very well. Now,
Mhm.
that's me speaking about past self with enlightened eyes. But in the past, I would have just taken that on and believed that all those things were absolutely true, and allowed it to do a detriment to my mental health.
Why do you think
Um,
that is? Why do you think that past self was kind of oriented in
oh,
that
she just
way?
didn't have self esteem. That's, I
Yeah.
think, point blank.
Yeah.
Didn't have self esteem, and didn't wasn't ever as a child allowed to kind of have the spotlight. Not that I ever wanted the spotlight, but if I had any kind of attention
Mhm.
onto me, there was a negative connotation to it.
I know that one really well.
Yeah, yeah,
Definitely.
yeah. So, like, if my grandmother doted on me, my grandfather said, I was a spoiled brat.
Mhm.
If um, if I wanted, to go for a bike ride, and I was, told that I could, and my younger brother, who wasn't, maybe as far where I was, emotionally, mentally, I was allowed to go for bike rides by myself. He was just 2 years younger. And when he got to be my age, he still wasn't able to go. And so, there was always some backlash in growing up for the good that I've done or when people doted on me. So the spotlight was never a comfortable place, and it caused me, I think, to sink in internally and not really own my worth. And then,
Yeah.
of course, when you grow up in that kind of energy, and then you take that energy into school with you, and you act like an awkward student, then you're going to gravitate to your weirdos. And and it worked out well for me because I have a lot of wonderful weirdos, including you. I know that you take that as a compliment
I do.
that I hang out with. Um, but it also served as a, further driving that self-esteem away because I wasn't widely accepted by people for a variety of reasons for my
Yeah.
entire life until I got to the point where I loved myself enough that I didn't necessarily need other people to do it for me. It
Yeah.
was nice, and it was sweeter when people did.
Well, what helped you at arriving at that point of, you know what, I love myself enough. It doesn't matter.
Hypnosis.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
short answer, hypnosis. I know that you know this story, and if you'll allow me, I'll tell this story because you never know who's listening and who
Please
it
do.
can help. What's that? Please
Please.
do.
Yeah.
Um, so, 1996, I was going through what's called postpartum depression now, but it wasn't in the DSM at the time. Nobody knew what it was. They just said, "Oh, it's the baby blues. You'll get over it." Well, my baby was a year old in 1996, so it had to be something else. And I quite honestly, and I'll spare the listeners the jarring imagery, but I was sitting in a bathtub contemplating that maybe life isn't worth living. And there was something, though, inside of me that didn't truly believe that. I can't explain it any other way other than there was a smaller voice inside of me that was going, "That's not true. We need help." So I started thumbing through the yellow pages. And for those of you who don't know what the yellow pages are, you can Google that. Um, so I'm thumbing through the yellow pages and looking for, quite literally, like, send me a sign, God, because I don't know. I've tried everything else. I tried therapy. I've gone to a different therapist. I'd been on medication. Nothing else was working. And it was in that journey where this change happens, where I see an ad for a hypnotist, and I thought, why the hell not? I tried everything else. Nothing else has worked. And how many times do us hypnotists hear that on the phone when we get those calls? All the time,
Yeah.
right? I was not much different than a lot of people that call us. But I had a compassionate ear on the other side that my problems were not little or small. They were mine, and it was important.
Yeah. Was
And
that the first time you'd heard that?
it was the first time I'd heard it at all. Nobody ever cared enough to care about what I was going through, right? Because again, spotlights on Nora. You'll get over it. You'll be fine. She's just trying to get attention. No, none of that was true. I was truly dealing with depression and suicidal ideology. I went to this hypnotist who later became my teacher and mentor because one session so profoundly worked that a light switch just clicked, and I went, "You mean I don't, pardon the expression, I don't have to feel like shit for the rest of my life?
Right. Yeah.
You mean I don't have to carry around everybody else's issues and baggage? You mean, oh, that belongs to them. It's not mine. It's about them and not me." That was really profound. And what was even more profound is that I could start looking at my issues and do something about those issues and not feel like crap because I wasn't perfect.
Yeah.
And so it was really hypnosis for me that was that turning point of shifting my mindset to something other than what had been ingrained and indoctrinated in me of unworthiness all of my life.
Yeah.
And the sad part about it is it took me, 25 years to get there, but I
So,
got there.
yeah. Devil's advocate, I'd actually like to say, what if it wasn't hypnosis? What if it was something that happened before that? And the only reason
Hmm.
I say that is because my, I guess, kind of opening came from the same place. It was
Mm.
being in this situation of utter terror and not being able to shift out of it, regardless of how hard I had fought to exhaustion on every level, until eventually I came to what I call a surrender. And I don't
Mm.
play with surrender lightly. And when I guide clients to do this, I let them know, okay, this is because you've decided there are no other options. You're boxed in. What if
Yeah.
this is your way out? Do you want to try? And so, what I heard you saying was that request for help. And to me, that sounded like part of a surrender.
Yeah. No, I think you touched on something really correct there because, yeah, because even though that was the helper, right, that was a tool
Yeah.
to the means that we in that same statement, right, I could have chosen an unfortunate different tool to a means to an end.
Yeah.
But there was something that happened before I even made that phone call, before I even picked up that phone book that
Mm.
said, this is not how I want to live anymore.
Yeah.
I need something different because I can't continue this way and hurt this much.
Yes.
Mhm.
Yes.
That's exactly true. Yeah. We don't often listen to that small voice, and it's not that we don't listen to it. It's sometimes the world just gets so chaotic and we get so bogged down with all the other stuff that we can't hear it. And or we tell ourselves we can't hear it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I took a tinnitus training the other day with
Mm.
Barry Neal, and he's a wonderful trainer if ever you get a chance. And what he was saying was, as we were learning about tinnitus, is that often we learn to tune out sound all the time. Like we just, the
We
more
do.
consistent it is, the less urgent it is, the more we don't need to hear it. And so when you're talking about that little voice inside that's always there, maybe not as loud as the others, I have to wonder if we just tune it out.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. We tune it out. Um, maybe maybe it's because of chaos because we think our attention needs to be in other places at the moment.
Mm.
Um, maybe we tune it out because it's telling us things that like I mentioned a little bit ago, that we haven't heard about ourselves, and we go, that can't be true. I have no business thinking like I deserve anything good, right? So we get stuck in that cycle of not deserving and not having worth because maybe we were told for so long and then we took it on and started to believe it. There's a lot of things that can drown that small voice out.
Yeah.
Um, Trauma
Mhm.
is often one of those things because our mind is set up to keep us safe. And so sometimes, even when those good, positive voices come in to try to help us regulate some worth in our life, we don't allow ourselves to hear it because for some reason, the wall comes up to try to protect us from.
Mhm.
It's like building a cocoon. Sometimes you need to be in that cocoon of healing and stay. Um, I feel anyway. I feel like it's that there's the timing has to be right. There, I needed to stay in my stuck zone for
Yeah.
the exact period of time that I was in my stuck zone because I needed to learn resiliency. Because if I didn't have that time in that cocoon of the muck and the ugliness and all that stuff, I
Mhm.
wouldn't be the resilient person I am today.
Right. Yeah, you wouldn't have had what you needed to finally face the leopard eventually.
Mm-hmm.
Anything in its incubation phase, it's there for a reason, but we don't look at it, we call it stuck phase or whatever else. We feel bad. There's shame that comes with
Mm-hmm.
that rather than saying, oh, I'm incubating, I'm growing some resiliency, I'm growing some strength right now so that when I finally break through that cocoon, the wings are going to come out. They're going to be strong enough to pump the blood and to be able to fly.
Yes,
Aw.
absolutely, absolutely. And I think I put this in. When we initially talked about me being in the podcast, that I had to come to understand the benefit of doing that, of being able to say, this stuff that I'm dealing with right now sucks. Simultaneously, while I am experiencing moments of joy and gratitude and happiness, right? We that stuck phase, I think, often leads people to believe that you can't experience two things at the same time.
Yeah.
Everything just sucks, and that's how it is, and it just everything sucks. But what
Mhm.
about this wonderful thing of here? Nope, I can't enjoy that because everything sucks, right? I
Yeah.
had to learn the benefits of compartmentalizing for my own sanity, because
Mhm.
otherwise, in that stuck state, I wouldn't have realized, and you don't realize it in the moment that, oh,
Mhm.
you know, until you start to do the work, you don't realize, oh, I'm building resiliency, I'm building strength. I need to
Yeah.
shut the world out for a while, right? Until you practice the stuff that we practice, right? Now, you and I, where we are in our lives, when we know we need to shut in, we understand
Mhm.
why we need to do that for periods of time.
We can actually
Like we,
relish it in the process now too, whereas
yeah,
before,
we
it would have been
like,
like,
oh
"Oh, this is
yes, thank
awful." It's
you.
like, "Oh, I can relax for a minute? Oh, yeah. I'm gonna take
it's
advantage of
like
this one."
it's
Yeah.
like it's like the universe giving you permission to just punch out for a minute. I need you to be over here doing this
Yeah.
because something, bigger might be coming, and you need to have that strength and resiliency in order to overcome what's coming,
Mhm.
or to be able to enjoy whatever is coming. We don't
Whatever
we
you're
don't
being
exactly
called to
know.
do.
Hmm.
Yeah, whatever the next calling is going to be.
Yeah.
That little voice, if you had to label it, feel into that for a moment. What was
Hmm.
that for you?
Well, I think I have multiple little voices. um, which don't
Most of
be
us do.
don't be scared. I'm not diagnosed with with
All of the best
schizophrenia.
people do, and most of
Yeah.
us do. Yeah.
Um, I've come to learn, I think, that those inner voices are they're my protectors, they're my inner guides,
Mhm.
or my ethereal guides.
Yeah.
Um, they they know and sense and understand things before I receive them on a conscious or cognitive level.
Mhm.
And so it's kind of like, some people describe it as, oh, I had this epiphany, like a light bulb moment. And I kind of feel like they're the ones who are in charge of flipping the switch. They kind of give me a heads up that, oh, by the way, three,
Yeah.
two, one. Oh,
As you said that, I got this image in my mind of like train conductors, and they're like watching the train. Okay, time to move the track over.
yeah, yeah. Ready,
Yeah.
now go. Um, so yeah, I kind of, I like in each of them, they all kind of have their own personality, which is why I stress that I don't have, that's not my mental health
Yeah.
diagnosis. Um, I firmly understand that these are guides that help me to
Mm.
keep me safe, to help me to understand and
Yeah.
help me to compartmentalize. And I think in some ways they're all rooted in what I didn't have as a child,
Okay.
right? So they're all kind of rooted back that far of, we've always been with you.
Mm.
You just didn't know it.
Yeah.
Um, I think it also, they also are largely responsible for my creative outlets
Yeah.
that have helped me through these processes. So yeah, they, it's
Yeah.
been an
So
interesting journey.
you had said when we were talking about doing this episode that it took you several years to overcome your barriers to betterment and to fully embrace your gifts. What were the barriers? How does somebody know when they are in that cocoon and they're being called to higher purpose? What are some of those barriers that can come up?
For me, some of those barriers were my lived experience,
Mhm.
specifically with religion. I,
Yeah.
in some maybe small ways, not any kind of grandiose ways like I hear and read about, but I have some trauma that comes from not worshiping correctly.
Mm.
I don't know other way to say that, but
Yeah.
for a long time, I had it ingrained in me that if I didn't do things this particular way, this order, believe this way, then I was going to go to hell. Um, I had to come to learn that that wasn't up to the people who were telling me that. That's not for them to decide, right?
Yeah.
And so I really, part of those barriers were just trying to um, unlearn that those things weren't necessarily true and they didn't, or I don't know that they're true or not true.
Mhm.
I also had to, in the process of those getting rid of those barriers, really had to build up my own boundaries with people and have them understand that you're entitled to your belief, but you don't get to label me as, you know, evil or all the other things that can come with being a hypnotist or doing the things that I do.
Yeah.
So some of those barriers, like I said, they had to do with lived learned experiences, things that I was told, other people's values
Mhm.
were certainly barriers.
Mhm.
Um, some of the other barriers that have come up have been largely around religion. You know, how can you call yourself a Christian and do these things? Well, because I do.
Mhm.
I don't know how else to explain it. I just do.
Was there a
Um,
particular age range that that happened for you more predominantly? And I didn't realize we had like some commonality there.
yeah, certainly a little bit in my teens when, you know, you start to get inquisitive and ask questions about why this is true.
Yeah.
And people can't tell you why it's true. It's just because that's what belief and faith is, right?
Mhm.
And it just didn't resonate with me. So I started to kind of question,
Yeah.
oh, maybe I'm not a good Christian because I don't know what that means. But these same people that were condemning my questioning were going out and partying all weekend and getting in trouble with the law. And
Yeah.
I'm going, huh? You're a
Mhm.
good Christian by your definition, but doing these things, I don't understand it. Um, and so I learned, you know, through my own exploration, like that's not for me to judge them,
Yeah.
but it just didn't help me wrap my head around to understand, like, why what you're saying, how is what you're saying true if you're doing things far worse than I'm doing,
Right.
and somehow I'm bad. Um,
What do you think brought you to that realization that you were doing things differently?
oh gosh,
I mean, other than other people's judgment, but like, where did that emanate from? Is kind of where I'm.
yeah.
Yeah.
Um, I think it came with a lot of like self discovery of just sitting with my conversations with the divine.
Hmm.
That I understand that you placed me here with some sense of purpose, and I'm
Yeah.
still discovering what that purpose is. I think also through when I started to study mindfulness studies, I really became came to understand that I get a lot of calls, and I know that this will resonate with you and probably a lot of your listeners, where people will say, you know, I want to do hypnosis or I want to do Reiki or other things I do in here because I want to achieve enlightenment.
Yeah.
And boy, are they disappointed when I tell them I can't give that to them.
And that's one of those things that the more that you chase it, the further it kind of goes. And yet, when you can come to that place of surrender and allowing and non attachment, that's when you actually get closer. Like,
Absolutely. The
yeah.
other thing too is that I can help lead you in personal development and I can facilitate processes that help
Yeah.
you to find enlightenment yourself, certainly.
Yeah.
Um, but when people call and say, I just want to feel enlightened, as in ED, as in past tense,
Well,
I can't. And I can't do that. None of us get that until we pass to the other side.
We
So,
can. We can to an extent.
well, I feel
We
like
can
it's
be enlightened on our
enlightenment,
shadow behavior. We can be enlightened about it. Our
but
unconscious can be enlightened.
but
Yeah.
I feel my belief is that that's actually enlightenment, meaning it's a
Mm,
lifelong process. So when you're talking
yeah.
about being enlightened, it's not like
Yeah.
opening a book and closing a book, right? It's
Yeah.
enlightenment where it's a process throughout your whole life where you might work in the shadows, right?
Yeah.
For a
Yeah.
period of time. Let's say you sit down in 3 months, I'm going to do this work and do this in depth work and really tune in and figure this thing out, right? And then you go through another season in life,
Mhm.
15 years down the road, maybe, and you go, oh, wait a minute. I remember this. Maybe I need to do this work again. So that's why I say it's always enlightenment because it's a process. We don't
Yeah.
truly get enlightened when at the end, when we're on the other side. And I feel, and again, this is my belief, that, when the great book is opened and you're looking through that
Mhm.
portal of what was, is when you get and when you're truly enlightened and you go, aha,
Mhm.
I understand now.
Yeah.
We don't, but through this particular lifetime, I believe that it's enlightened. We get enlightenment as we go on. Um,
But it's also a bit of like semantics because
mhm.
for me, enlightenment can be bringing light to the dark. It can be, and those are things we don't often get during the process. That's usually a hindsight kind of thing. We're not like, oh, I was in a cocoon phase because I was building that muscle, building that resilience. No,
Mhm.
you don't get that in
No,
the moment. You get that after when you look
yes,
back.
I can see where
That's when the
you would
enlightenment
come
comes.
to that.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and it is a process, right? And we don't always get the answers we're seeking immediately, and
Yeah.
that can cause a lot of frustration. And I
Oh,
think,
yeah.
and again, in my lived learned experience, I think it was probably some of what led to or aggravated my mental health issues.
Mm.
Because um, I wasn't, I was always told, that going back to the thing, if my grandmother doted on me, I was a spoiled brat, or there was always a negative connotation to having any kind of attention put on me.
Right.
And so whenever I tried to go back and look at myself and do any self work initially, I think, that was met with resistance, but not because I didn't want to do the work, but because I felt like I didn't deserve to do the work,
Yeah.
because it wasn't my place. I was just, you know,
Yeah.
it, but through time, like I said, build up that resiliency and had to learn. It took me a lot of years to learn that I wasn't living wrong. Yeah.
So, coming from that, as you were talking about that, I wondered, like, what was that like the first time you actually received recognition? Because I had my own experience with that. And then I realized, wow, Amanda, like, reflecting on that, that didn't feel super graceful. You have to work on, like, being recognized. I could have crawled out of my skin at that moment, and that would have been more favorable than being recognized, honestly. So, what was that like for you?
um, I think being recognized, like, there's professionally and there's personally for
Mm-hmm.
me. Personally, it was just, I still kind of pinch myself like that there's this other human that just sees me flaws and all and just adores
Yeah.
me regardless.
Other humans,
This
plural.
humans plural, but yes, one in particular that I thought of in that moment, my husband. Um, so it's
Yeah.
still a little difficult to take, as you say, humans plural, where
Yeah.
um, I had a lady in here just this morning that was like, um, I just hope that that and she was just, gushing about how wonderful I am and how much she loves coming here, which is great to hear. But at the
Yeah.
same time, it's a little bit uneasy. Like, you kind of want to do
Yeah.
internally, you're going, oh, stop. No, keep going. No, stop. Tell me more. No, that's enough. Oh, no, I want to hear more. It's a little
I
bit of
didn't
a
have that
battle.
aspect of tell me more. It was just like, okay, great, we're done now. Let's move on.
Yeah. But But professionally, when it happened, you know, for people who, who know me, I am genuinely humble. And but internally, that little kid inside of me is just going, well, of course they love you, and so I
Oh,
have to tamper her. I feel like sometimes I have to
no,
go,
that's so
keep it
endearing.
keep it under wraps so you look professional.
Yeah.
Because I think that for me, and it certainly happened before this, but I'll tell you one time that stands out more recently
Mhm.
was last year at HTL. Um, I had my very first nearly full room, which was like, oh my gosh, these people
Those are
came to
big
hear
rooms. For people
me.
who don't know, HypnoThoughts Live is the biggest hypnosis conference in the world, most likely, but definitely the US, and they are big
Mhm.
rooms.
Yeah. And it's daunting when you are
Yeah.
standing up there and people whose work you've followed for decades are sitting in the front row staring right at you. And it was for me last year. But it was beautiful too in the fact that, and
Yeah.
I won't name drop, but there were one
Yeah.
row of profound people whose work I follow, people that were certainly there that were my friends and supporting me, people I had never met. Of course, my husband was there, but it
Yeah.
was something that I, that particular talk was something I had never done before.
Hmm.
And that is, I decided to walk in that room that day and own my story. And I didn't use my script notes. I had bullet points usually that's like, this is what I'm going to talk about.
Yeah.
And I try to stay on task for the sake of time. And, you want to be respectful of your presenters before you and after you and so forth. So I just went in and hit the play button on my PowerPoint and would talk about the slide and hit it again and I just talked because it was my life story essentially. I'm just telling them my lived learned experience.
Hmm.
And when I tell you that these people who I've looked up to were sitting there looking back at me with tears in their eyes, it
Oh.
made me emotional because some of those people, if you knew who they were, they're not easy nuts to crack.
Hmm.
Um, so I don't like want to say like that I took pleasure in making people cry, but I say that to,
Yeah.
it was in that moment that, wow,
Yeah.
my story impacted these people.
Hmm.
And to hear people when I got outside in the hallway tell me like, oh my gosh, like you had me from go because your story sounds like my story in this part of my life. And a lot of that was happening. And what came to fruition was as I'm walking to take my stuff back to my hotel room,
Yeah.
it's a long conference room where we're at the Sahara. And I'm walking back to my hotel room and I might have, I wasn't even across the whole conference area. We take up one whole like floor basically in this
Yeah.
hotel room or in the conference area. And I was not even halfway back to the table yet, and to go downstairs to the escalator to go to the elevators.
I know
And
exactly where you were as you
yeah,
described
yeah,
it.
in that main hallway by the vendors room is, yeah, and so the founder of Hypnothoughts Live, Scott Sandlin, stopped me in the hallway and said, "I just heard what just happened in that room,
Yeah.
and do you know why you get invited back every year?"
Yeah.
And I was like, no. Like, in my head, I'm going, because you have to fill spots, because I don't know. But I know a lot of people
Oh,
apply, and
yeah.
I get blessed to get invited back every year. He said, because even as busy as I am, he goes, and I know you see how busy I am.
Mhm.
I notice what you're doing. That's why you get
Mhm.
invited back. And so
Yeah.
he had heard that, people were emotional. My story was really impactful. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, that was from a professional standpoint, that was kind of the moment that was like, I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing. That went
Yeah.
exactly how it was supposed to go. There was no
Yeah.
doubt in my mind. And that was even before Scott stopped me in the hallway. I was like, that was exactly how that was supposed to go. And
Yeah.
then Scott just kind of put the cherry on top of the sundae. So,
Oh,
yeah.
I've had some of those moments, and I wish there was a name for it. I don't have a word, but for me, it's a full body sensation occurring. And
Yeah.
there can be these immense feelings of gratitude and awe and self
Hmm.
appreciation that can just flow in, and like synchronicity and knowing. Do you have a word to call it when it happens to you?
You would ask me that, right? I'm the word person, right? My whole podcast is based on words.
Please tell us more about that.
Let me pull up one from my wheel. Um, Gosh, I the word that comes to mind, I think, would be like epiphany. Like
Mm.
it just embodies like this. That's your aha right there. That's your lane. That's what you're supposed to be doing. That right there.
See, for me,
Um,
epiphany is such a, it doesn't quite hit it for me. For me, it's a level of embodying. So I
mm,
want that epiphany feel of, oh, this comes from divine. So when I think of epiphany, that's a gift
it's
from
more up
divine
and
that just
ethereal.
dropped in.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
but we're pulling it down in. So I want something that's
Mm,
more like, yeah,
yeah. Now, see, now you're
grounded.
gonna make me think. I don't know if I have like a. I don't know if I have a word. I'll have to think about that because it does really feel like that. Like I think first it's an epiphany, and then you just kind of
Yeah.
embody like this is who I am. Yeah, that's a really good way to say
Wow,
that
I get like
because
full on goosebumps in those moments. Like,
oh
and
yeah,
there's something at my core that is like kind of shaken or awakened.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there is. I don't. Maybe there isn't a word to truly describe it. It's just a sensation.
So
It's
that'll be
just.
something for you and your co-host to add to your list of words.
I'll ask. I'll ask her. I'll ask her. She might have a word in her bowl that describes that whole embodiment.
Yeah.
Um, she's great with the words too.
Tell us a bit about your podcast.
Unscripted energy. It's one of my babies. So thank you for asking. Um, my co-host Pat Jones and I do unscripted energy. Unscripted energy is we do 16 episodes in a season. And the premise essentially is we decided that Pat and I would have these great talks. We would just walk in the park when she used to live in my neighborhood. Now she's moved away from me, but we would have these great, and I said that with sadness because she's not my neighbor anymore, but I still see her.
Yeah.
But we'd have these talks, and I'm like, we should be recording this. Like this stuff is amazing that we chat about. We both talk about embodiment. Like we would both leave those talks in the park just feeling like, wow, you know? And so we thought it would make a good podcast, but we didn't really know how to formulate these talks into a podcast. So we came up with the premise of picking a word of the week because everything is energy. The words you think, or the words you say, the thoughts you think, everything is energy. And certainly when people say certain words, it resonates somewhere within you. If I were to say the word living, certainly that falls upon you. You feel it somewhere. It's expressed through a sensation. It happens with every word. So we started to just do that. We'll pick a word of the week. Let's meditate on it, give people the definition for clarity, and just have a conversation around that word and see what comes up, where we feel it, the energy that it entices, whatever comes up. Now, it's unscripted for a couple of reasons. One, because we like the authenticity of just saying what's on our mind and not being rehearsed.
Mhm.
The second is because yours truly is not have the wherewithal of the technological background of how to do the edits and so forth. So we have
Yeah.
played with a lot of fun with that. And it's not that I couldn't learn. I am very busy, which is a good thing. So we
And
have just made
also,
it an
it affords for
enlightened.
so much beautiful opportunity too. So,
It's become just a funny part of the podcast because one time during COVID, I was recording at home. Wasn't here in the office, and we quite literally, the neighbors, they didn't get the memo that we're recording a podcast next door, and they were mowing the lawn. We just called it out in the middle of the podcast, like this is real life, people. Um, and we just made it part of the show. So that's been kind of fun of the things happening, cats meowing at the door. Um, all kinds of things. You never know what's going to happen. That's the beauty of unscripted. So yeah, it's on Spotify for people who want to listen. Um, it was on Google Podcasts as well, but they've done Google Podcasts has done away with podcasts recently.
Mhm.
So just on Spotify, we're happy with Spotify. Hopefully, they're still happy with us. So yeah,
I will put a link in the show notes so that if people want to head on over and experience the beauty and the magic and the fun, the authenticity of unscripted energy, that they can.
we've
I
been
do
blessed to have
highly
you on as
recommend.
a guest.
That was a great episode. We had a lot of fun, and in true nature, Transcendence arrived.
Absolutely. We actually got done with that after you left.
Yeah.
We were finishing up stuff on the podcast, and Pat goes, "Was that not a perfect word for Amanda or what?" I'm like, "We couldn't have picked it better if we
Yeah.
tried." And it is truly, um, you know, like unscripted. Like we pick it the
Yeah.
word live on the air. We have had people, and you might have been one of those people. I don't remember, but have people said, "Hey, can this be my word when
Hmm.
I come on?" And we've said,
Yeah.
"Well, in true nature of the form, we'll take your word. We'll
Yeah.
put it on our wheel, but no,
Yeah.
we spin, and whatever comes up, it's meant to be your word." So
I'm trying to
it
remember
was
what
meant
the
to be.
word. There was a word that I recommended, and I'm trying to remember what it was. It was a unique one.
It was. I went back and I looked. I
Yeah.
could look at the show notes and tell you, but um,
Yeah, it came up in meditation, and in any form, we got the word miracle that day, and it
we
wasn't that
did.
far off from the word that I had kind of
No, it made me
recommended
laugh.
anyway. Yeah.
Mm,
Neat little organic moments.
yeah,
So
it was a lot of fun.
what else in the story of you are you feeling called or compelled to share for people who might be going through it themselves?
Yeah, I think it's important for me to share this part of my story because
Mhm.
so much stigma lays around um, living with a mental health issue or mental health
Mhm.
illness. And part of my process of recovery has not only helped me to and overcome the stigmas, but really to be a best advocate for people like myself with a mental health issue. Because of some of the things I've gone through in my life, I was diagnosed with CPTSD. So for those of you who do not know what that is, a chronic post-traumatic stress disorder. Um, and that's just because I've had a series of truly traumatic events back to back to back, and not like, 1 year on top of each other, but so
Mhm.
significantly short periods of time that had caused me to develop a certain underlying anxiety disorders as well. So there's still things I'm even working through today. But I say that to say this, that it's possible to live with a mental health issue
Mhm.
and to thrive. And a lot of times when we're given a mental
Yeah.
health diagnosis, or any kind of diagnosis, medical or otherwise, because I've certainly gone through some of
Mhm.
those things, those labels can tend to weigh heavy on us. And we can start to identify with what those are. And you don't have to. You can take care of yourself. I don't live every day as if the bottom is going to fall out and the next sound is going to send me spiraling. But
Mhm.
certainly I'm aware that there are things like, if I dropped a knife the other day doing the
Mhm.
dishes, and it rattled me for a second. But the
Mhm.
good news is like they're briefer moments. Like I have built in that resiliency and that coping, and you can too. It didn't come overnight, and it didn't come simply because I have these skills as a hypnotist or Reiki
Mhm.
master. People are surprised to learn that I have a therapist.
Mhm.
And I'm pretty open about the fact that I still go to therapy. And it's PRN now; it's as needed.
Yeah.
So I don't go on a regular every other week basis anymore. Um, I don't take medication because I don't need to now. But there was no shame in it when I did. And
Mhm.
I just want to emphasize that because there is so much stigma around having
Yeah.
those labels put on you, and it can really feel heavy and make people feel like they can't do or can't live or can't be because they've been given a
Right.
diagnosis, and it's simply not true.
When
Um,
you said chronic, I wondered if that was Freudian. Um, I've been given a diagnosis of complex PTSD myself.
mhm.
And I'm also at the point now where I'm distanced enough where I can see that no, I've healed through a lot of those body responses, a lot of those phantom auditory flashbacks or emotional flashbacks. And now I'm
Yeah,
at a point where to trigger a flashback in me is no easy task. Someone is really going above and beyond
yeah,
demonic to try to hit
yeah.
a point on me. It's not easy anymore. But for me, and what you surmised there, even though you'd said chronic, was that it doesn't have to be chronic
It
and
does not.
you can resolve it. And that I completely and wholly agree with. Where I went to school was Southwest Institute of Healing Arts. Casey Miller would often say, a great coach has a coach. A
Hmm.
great hypnotist has a hypnotist. And it's true. And
Yep,
sometimes, at the end of the
absolutely.
day, we're human. We're always doing our own work. We're always doing our own healing and growth, and we need outside perspective
If
because
you
sometimes
don't
we're
do,
too far in the cocoon.
yeah, and if you
Yeah,
don't do your own self care, you can't take care of other people.
yeah,
I can't pour from an empty pitcher. That's absolutely true. Um, if I'm not filling up my vessel, I can't give to other people.
right.
And so I have had to do a lot of work in order to um, recognize, when I do need to take a break, when I do need,
Hmm.
um, a self care day or what have you. I no longer feel guilty for treating myself well. Let me say that again. I no longer feel guilty for treating myself well. It took a long time to get there, but it's been worthwhile.
Yeah,
And I can tell you that, like Amanda said, you don't have to stay there. It doesn't have to be chronic.
yeah,
Um, and like you, I don't have the flashbacks anymore. Sometimes even if I get an image, it's very fleeting.
yeah.
Um, Largely, I don't like surprise. That's the thing we're working on lately. I don't like surprise,
Okay.
so don't throw me a surprise party. I,
Yeah, I have
I
some
don't do well with
reframing going on
surprise.
in my head. All kinds of reframes are coming out.
Yeah. So I had to work on those things,
Yeah,
especially like these last couple of weeks when we were on vacation, right?
yeah.
At the time I was in four, five different places I've never been before.
Mm,
And I was on vacation. So with that element comes a sense of relaxation, right?
yeah,
So it was a little bit easier to be able to deal with those things. But certainly, all the work I've done has been a credit to how well I did with visiting these four places and not knowing what was going to come around the corner. I did really, really well. So, um, you can too. And don't
yeah.
be afraid to, um, if you feel like the protocol that you're using currently, if
Hmm.
you feel like you're not finding a sense of relief, don't be afraid to speak up and talk to your
Yeah,
practitioners, your family doctor, whomever, um, that something's not working.
yeah.
Because ultimately it's about you and your wellness, not their ego. So
I
remember
was
that.
misdiagnosed at one point.
Yeah.
So to say the value of a second and third opinion is massive. It definitely is.
Necessary.
And this woman hit me with a diagnosis that was so shocking that even my husband was like, no, I'm going to go in and I'm going to go see what the hell happened. That's a no.
Yeah, yeah, that
Um,
happens so many times.
but
And
when you receive that, there's that question, those some of those little voices that aren't so consistent and aren't so kind in the background are like, well, what do I know?
yeah, yeah, they're the ones with the professional degrees
Right.
and such on the wall. Who am I to tell them that they're wrong?
At the end of
You
the day, there's
know
still people.
they are. And
Yeah.
not to
Yeah.
discredit anyone in anyone's profession, but my husband often says, or has said to me in the past, you know what they call the student who graduates last in med school?
Mhm.
doctor.
Mm. Chris does have a wonderful sense of humor.
Yeah. So you don't know where they graduated in their med school class. Um,
Right.
they're
Mhm.
they may get it wrong from time to time. You know yourself,
Yeah.
and so don't be afraid to have those conversations, and ask them why they believe such diagnosis is true. What, you know, you're not a doctor, but they also don't know you like you know you.
All right.
Um, so, having those conversations and coming to some kind of a collaborative effort in your care could be quite beneficial.
Absolutely. And sometimes finding an advocate is helpful as well.
Mm-hmm.
Someone to say, hey, you know what? Maybe it is time for that second opinion now. The thing that comes to
Absolutely.
mind, oh, sorry,
No, I
go
said
ahead.
absolutely. That patient advocates, if you don't have them in your hospital, you can also check with your local mental health boards to see if they have peer support advocates. They're becoming more widely available across the
Mm-hmm.
country. So there'll be
Yeah,
people that can help you to, help maybe not to speak for you, but to help you to understand how to speak for yourself.
right. Just an extra set of ears to help with the mental filtering that happens as well.
Yes.
Uh, as we were talking about everything, what I was thinking was, at what point do you get to say, okay, this is no longer a diagnosis, this is no longer a label, but rather this is a set of conditions in which my body responds as I'm learning to be comfortable in different and new situations.
Yeah. I think probably in the last 2 years, that's
Yeah.
where I truly am. Um, I think it came when I had my, probably about 2.5 years or so ago, when I had my last profound episode. And when I say
Yeah.
episode, it's like they might look at it like as a mini break.
Hmm.
But I had gone to my therapist to just talk that out. And it was in that session that she said to me, "Why are you apologizing for what your automatic or autonomic nervous system was doing?
Yeah.
Like, it was doing its job. Why are you apologizing for that?" And it was in that moment that I realized that, oh, she's right. To some degree, I have control over this. To some degree, I do not. And my body did exactly what it was supposed to do in the moment when I was triggered and had the episode.
Yeah.
It also helped me to see that that episode was, largely aggravated by a variety of other things. And now through doing work with her, I've come to, and doing some of my own work with um, other practitioners such as yourself, I've
Yeah.
come to sense what I guess you would call the trigger sensation.
Hmm.
I've come to sense that in a different way now,
Hmm.
where it doesn't have the energy attached to it. So can sense it and go, oh, my body don't like that, or whatever it is, and call attention to it and go right into my tools. And what I've noticed as of lately, even probably in the last, I don't know, couple months or so, is I don't even have to have the sensation of the right of the knowing that comes. I can automatically now switch into. There's not even the conversation anymore of, "Ooh, I don't like this." It's
Yeah.
just, "Oh, this." It's more of that automatic. I just go into repair and reset, and
Yeah.
so it's taken a lot of work to get there, and it'll take some work to continue to maintain that. So it just becomes part of how I operate now.
It's conditioning. We can do it on so
Mm-hmm.
many different levels. It's mental, emotional, physical, autonomic
Mm-hmm.
conditioning. One of my favorite questions that I've stolen for this podcast
Oh boy.
is from Shelley Stockwell. One of the first times I heard her presenting, she asked this question, and I was still partly into complex PTSD, and so I thought it was genius.
Yeah.
She says, "What is your post-traumatic growth?"
That is a great
I
question.
know I should have asked it midway. We might have to come back for a whole other episode.
What is my post-traumatic growth? So in short, I would say my post-traumatic growth is understanding myself best, that I am not my trauma, I am me. Simply put.
That's very eloquent and very, very prompt, very appropriate. Yeah.
Thank you.
Oh. Anything you want the listeners today to take away the most profoundly out of everything we've talked about in your lived, learned experience?
I think to kind of surmise the points that I made is just you don't do yourself a service by allowing other people to weigh you down with these chains and labels that they just throw over your neck and tell you what you are. That's not who you are. So take those things off and really take a hard look at yourself and decide for yourself who you are and who you want to be, because it's only in that you're going to be able to find the healing and find the growth. Because continuing to let other people's labels weigh you down, quite honestly, could be lethal, in my experience.
Absolutely. And what is life if we're not always having the opportunity to redefine and to grow?
Yeah.
When we go into these scenarios, these appointments, these specialists, they don't get to see all of the positive things we've learned or grown through. They get to hear the complaint list.
Right, right.
They have nothing to compare to.
You don't go
Yeah,
in with, this is how great my life is today.
exactly.
And so we start to understand when we shift our mindset, that it's not that our problems aren't big, right? In the moment when they happen, certainly they have more energy, they take on more weight and more space. But when we stop and really look at ourselves and our problem and whatever we're going through simultaneously while looking at everything else, suddenly with that awareness, this issue doesn't seem like it's so big and unmanageable. So
Right.
take that time. You don't have to solve this thing immediately because it hurts, right? That's the reason I think we are so haughty and so feisty, so quick to just try to let me just put the Band-Aid on and go in the cocoon and pretend like this thing never happened, because we don't want it to hurt. There's a lot of resiliency and growth that comes from that space. I don't want you to hurt either, right? But when you start to just take a minute and look at that hurt, what's causing that hurt? Is it you? Is it somebody else? You start to realize the control that you do have, the locus of control that you do have. And the stuff that's not in your locus of control isn't your business. It's not of a benefit to you. And you need to just let it go so that you can move on and you can heal. If there's any kind of value to the input that other people are saying, right, for the betterment, because sometimes we don't want to hear what other people are saying. We think it's ridicule. We think it's nonsense. But in honesty, we haven't taken a good look at ourselves to know that, oh, there is an ounce of truth to what they're saying. I'm not being my best self right now. I've had moments like that. It's important to stop and take a look at that before you discard it, to find out if there is any truth to that, because maybe you're not thinking very clearly and not able to see yourself through your own eyes very clearly, where other people can, that maybe do know you, especially if it's coming from people that know you,
Yeah.
that you might want to take a moment to just investigate that for yourself and see if there is any truth to that, and what part of it can you change to get yourself away from the leopard, to take it back full circle.
I love that. Thank you for wrapping that up in a neat little bow for us. We
You're
are
welcome.
coming up to the time when you have to get ready for your next appointment, but
I
did you
do.
want to tell us real quickly about any upcoming projects or some of your books or where people find you?
Yeah, so you can. I do have there's a couple over my shoulder there. I do have a couple of books that I've written. I've written a meditation guide to kind of help people to understand what meditation is. It's available on Amazon in Kindle format. And then the Self Care for Crisis and the Mindful Eating Workbook are also available on Amazon, so you can look me up there. I have the long awaited Virtues of the Chakras coming out this year, I promise. It's been a
Mhm.
4-year project. And it'll be also be on Amazon. We're hoping by it's slated to go on by October 1st. So that's exciting. And then I have another one that's in the hopper. It's called Head Case. It's my life story of my trials and tribulations and how I overcome self sabotage in order to live the life I deserve. So, yeah, I'm excited about that. There's always community projects going on. So, if you follow my Facebook page at Haven Hypnosis Ohio, you'll be able to find different things we have going on in the community, including Paint Your Way Out. Um,
And you see
so,
people virtually as well. So if you're not in Ohio,
I
don't
do.
feel daunted. You can still work with Nora.
Yes, yes, I do see people on Zoom virtually or here in the office in Norwalk, Ohio. So reach out. Yeah, if I can help you, I'm happy to. And if I'm not your person, I'm tied into a lot of people all across this world that might be the person for you. So let me know.
Aw, thank you so much for being here today and sharing so deeply. We could talk forever.
I know. If I had another hour or so, we could continue to go on.
I would like to give you another hour because we didn't touch on your gifts, of which I know you have many. And for my own personal selfish reasons, I so much want to hear more about as you're unpacking them and learning about them.
It has been a journey. And yeah, 10 minutes wouldn't probably do it justice. But
No.
yeah, that's a whole other, probably other story, other segment down the road because especially my Reiki journey, it's taken me, I know you and I've had conversations about it. It's taken me to places that still make me scratch my head. I had clients call this morning because they know what I do and I've done profound things for them. And they've had um, some really traumatic things happen in their family recently. So we had some conversations around just, you know, hey, I'm experiencing this now since that happened. And, can you help me to understand that? I'm happy to take 30 minutes and have those phone conversations with people at no cost because I would rather do that than have them just dangling out there and wondering. I say that because um,
You've been
even
there.
though I did, yeah, even though I do a lot of good in this office, and we do a lot of good in what we do, when you deal with a traumatic event, especially, yes, there's a time for help and for healing, and everybody has like the best of intentions, but you need to be mindful about all of that because there may be things that you're not ready for
Mhm, mhm,
in that early healing. You want to try everything, like I said, to make the hurting just stop.
mhm.
And you can get overwhelmed with trying all the things and hoping the hurting just stops. And sometimes
Right.
you just need to just stop and not try all the things and just sit with the discomfort.
Allow it to arrive so that you can process it and so that it can
Yeah,
go organically.
absolutely.
But I don't want you to be late. Thank you so, so much.
Hey, thank you for having me.
Always a pleasure. Every time we get to connect is always a joy for me. So,
Oh, likewise, my friend. And I look forward to next time.
me too. We'll keep you posted on when that is. Thank
All
you
right.
so much. Thank you for joining us on this transformative episode of Trauma and Transcendence. Your stories matter. I would love to hear them and from you. Connect on our website, healingbeyondtrauma.com, or drop me an email at amanda@healingbeyondtrauma.com. Remember, Healing is a journey we take together. Until next time, stay connected, stay inspired. This is Amanda, wishing you bright blessings.